fellow geeks. Welcome to Geeking Out, the podcast about all geeky aspects of software delivery, DevOps, observability, reliability, and everything in between. I'm your host, Adriana Villela, coming to you from Toronto, Canada. And geeking out with me today, I have a very special guest, Taylor Dolezal of the CNCF. Welcome, Taylor.
Yo, howdy, howdy, howdy. Excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on the podcast. And as we're recording this, you're in the midst of some really nasty wildfires in the LA area.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's been literally a wild ride all around the city. But thankfully, this house where I'm at, everything's okay. Just a lot of ash, dust, debris. Really uplifting to see the community rally with one another too on everything, despite some people have lost homes. There's been some really challenging, really sad things that have happened, but seeing everybody jump in and want to help one another out, truly beautiful. Seeing everybody get so involved.
I love that.
There have been things like the Comedy Store here, a big like world famous comedy place. They're having free shows and raising money, so like things that I never would have expected Los Angeles to do, really, going forth and doing. It's beautiful. I love seeing that.
Oh my God, that's so nice. And especially, in the midst of all of the, I don't know, there's just so much negativity in the world. It's so nice to just see like a bright spot in the midst of this tragedy too. So yay, yay humanity.
Yeah, bring the light, bring the sun. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, I do want to dig into that topic a little bit more, but before we get going into that, I'm going to subject you to my icebreaker questions. All right, here we go. You ready? All right, first question: are you a lefty or a righty?
Ooh, righty.
All right. Next question: do you prefer iPhone or Android?
iPhone since 2009.
Nice.
Fun fact: I had a I was one of the people that got a BlackBerry Storm with the one clickable button way back in the day. I'm like, trackball, no thanks. Yeah, the price of adoption there, not a good one. I think all of those phones, V1, ended up being returned. By the way, fun fact. But
damn, yeah, I heard they were quite glitchy. I had a pre-storm BlackBerry. I think I had a BlackBerry Curve, and then it started shutting down spontaneously in the middle of calls. And I'm like, screw this. This is when I switched to iPhone.
I was surprised to find when I worked at Disney later on, like 2016 to 2020, they had a RIM server there and they were supporting that. So there were still vestiges of BlackBerry around the world.
Damn, what?
Yeah, wild.
That's wild. Wow. The things that are still around. That's bananas. All right, next question. Do you prefer Mac, Linux, or Windows?
I'd say, ooh, that's a tough one. I'd say it's like 55% Mac. I really like Linux and stuff like that. I do want to. Is 2025 the year of Linux on the desktop? I sub that out for every year. I think that we'll get there someday. But George Castro, one of my coworkers, and Bob and Jiffy have me contemplating moving to a framework laptop or something like that. So we'll see. But Mac for right now. But Linux is looking pretty good.
I feel one day we'll get there with Linux. I had a dedicated Linux desktop back in the day, but I had to dual boot it with Windows. Or at one point I had a Windows VM, and because I couldn't sync my BlackBerry and then subsequently my iPhone to Linux, so I'm like, bye.
It's really the ecosystem, much like CNCF, haha, but it's that. What's the interoperability look like? That's like I can do something on Linux, but will my Zoom program work tomorrow? I don't know.
Exactly.
So stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel you. Okay, next question. Do you have a favorite programming language?
I do. It's like I love all of my languages just the same. All my children,
all your babies.
Which dog is your favorite? I don't have a favorite. Right now I'm really deep into like early days. So give you a quick run, I promise. VB6, .NET, Visual Basic, then C#, and then PHP, Ruby. And so I was moving through those. Python's come up a bit, not really my favorite, especially with PEP 8 and the indentation stuff. So I love looking at a language and being able to like read it, really be able to grok, understand it. Go has been there for a while for me, but I lately have been taking a look at Rust a little bit. The one that I can't get away from for the past 10 years is Elixir.
Oh,
Taking a
really?
look at that functional programming, I think that, not trying to make fetch a thing, but I think that there's a lot there that we haven't tapped into yet. I see a lot of other people looking at Zig and these other things too, but I don't know. Everybody take a look at Elixir. It's a full stack. You get live updates and stuff like that. You don't have to jump between back end and front end and JavaScript. You stay in the same language. Looks cool.
Oh,
Um,
hello.
Used
That's
in
compelling.
telco. And then just I like how stable it is despite how the world might not be.
That's
So
awesome.
that's fun.
And
That's
fun
fun.
fact, there's hotel instrumentation for Elixir.
I saw it. I was so excited. It's like, see, yeah, somebody understands. But
That's cool.
functional programming, difficult, kind of thinking about your program as a flip book rather than I could just dot color. What are you?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, by the way, you mentioned VB6. Nostalgia, like that was the language I used in high school, and I
Yeah. Did I
started with
date
Basic.
myself? Yeah. Oh no, fax machines, VHS. Oh no.
Yeah, there's a very special place in my heart for VB6. Yeah, kind of miss it. It wasn't bad. Cool. Okay, next question. Do you prefer dev or ops?
Oof. Ah, yeah, can I split the difference? I'd
Sure.
say I think that it really depends on the day. It's not a cop out answer. I love distributed systems and just like, wow, beautiful. Look what we've been able to put together. But no, yeah, I'd say no. I'd have to lean a little bit more towards ops. Dev is fun when accomplishing that task, but I love seeing it all composed and tied together.
Yes, I definitely feel you. It's very satisfying. Okay, next one. Maybe I know what your answer is based on a previous comment. Do you prefer JSON or YAML?
I think, yeah, I know. This might come as a shock. I'm a big. I like JSON. That makes a lot more sense to me. YAML's great, but again, same kind of
Yeah, you mentioned
indentation
the
stuff.
spaces, the indentation. Yeah, yeah.
It's like, and in most parsers and stuff like that, you can go back and forth from JSON to YAML, which is a very helpful tip. Like
Yes.
JSON can be converted very quickly to YAML and back and forth. But yeah, my CNCF hat on YAML, of course, but JSON, JSON at home.
But also some like fun fact that, like I don't think most people realize also that you can write Kubernetes manifests in JSON. We just
Yeah,
mostly default to YAML.
exactly. It's like I think that what's the biggest secret that no one knows that you do? That's one of the ones that I
Yes.
would cite 100%.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, next question. Do you prefer spaces or tabs?
Tabs 100%. We spun up the end user tab. I thought that was enough of a sign to people what at least I preferred. We
Okay,
give them their space to do great things.
love it. Two more questions. Do you prefer to consume content through text or video?
Ooh, I say I love. It's hard to beat sitting on the couch during a cloudy day. Pretty rare here in Los Angeles, and then just kind of like pour through RSS feeds and stuff like that. I love reading and that kind of clarity. When it's something I don't understand and I really want that like deep aspect, or like, please just explain it to me. It's sitting down with a friend or video. That's the
Yeah.
best way to emulate that.
Yes. Oh, I like sitting down with a friend. Yeah, nothing beats that.
Yeah,
And
just
sometimes we forget to ask. Like I don't know. I get like so caught up in my own problem solving, like I must figure this out myself. And then it's like, or I could ask, my friend here who's an expert in this area.
It's it's my favorite being able to sit down. I really love and respect all the friends and people in the ecosystem that take the time and have the patience to sit down with me. Sometimes I feel bad because I'll treat them kind of like I'll have immediate hot takes. I'll be like, why is it like that? And then they're like, oh.
I love it. Okay, final question. What is your superpower?
Superpower, I'd say sleep, question mark. When something is really interesting, I'm sure a lot of people can relate. It's just that really takes the precipice and the focus on stuff.
Yes.
I think KubeCon, very rarely, and not like, hey, it's not a badge. It's not good to not get sleep, but don't do it. It hurts your brain. But it's just very difficult to manage or kind of understand or figure out the balance when something is so exciting as all of our community all together in the same place all at once. There's a lot of when
Exactly.
there's cool ideas afoot and lurking around, it's really hard to focus on much else and to lower the excitement for like, hey, okay, body, it's time to sleep.
Yeah.
So have had to learn a couple tricks on that one to actually get me to a place where I can get the rest I need. But
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's the energy. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if I'm solar powered or what, or I'm just absorbing
I love
radio
it.
waves, but I'll let you know when I figure it out.
That's so great, and I think this is a great segue into our conversation. There's so many topics that I want to dig into, but first and foremost, KubeCon EU is right around the corner at the time that we're recording this, taking place in London. And as you said, it's like so much excitement. Like I attended my first KubeCon in Detroit in 2022, and oh my god, I was like, it was so overwhelming. And so whenever like new to KubeCon people, you know, come in, I'm like, don't worry, just like it'll be intense. It's okay. There's a lot of stuff going on. Just find an area where you feel comfortable.
Marathon, not a sprint. All
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
yeah, pressure makes diamonds, as Chris Anachek will say.
Yeah, and KubeCon is always so much fun too because it's got like such rock concert vibes, especially on the opening day keynote. Like it's usually like this massive room, or multiple rooms have been like you know combined, and like yeah, it's just such a fun production. Is there anything that you're looking forward to in this upcoming KubeCon?
I think honestly, I'm really curious about the stories that are AI has kind of been big, fascinating, and then oh my gosh, shh, I don't want to hear it anymore. We're still kind of figuring out that space, and it's
Yes.
definitely going through the okay, I've heard enough, like snooze a little bit framing, and so I think there's some cool things that people are doing that are amazing on the end user side. I'm kind of curious on those stories, but at the same time, with AI kind of blossom, it's like a fast growing tree, and
Yeah.
all of the leaf cover has kind of shaded out a lot of the other really interesting things that have been happening in the background that haven't gotten the spotlight or the attention. And so there is still your ever popular and present platform engineering and security. That's kind of like the AI is, more or less intentionally being left off, but you'll see it that you won't know it, but you'll see signs, around the periphery. But I think that I'm really curious to hear more about those adoption stories. Anecdotally, I think that there's a lot of people working on developer experiential type things,
Yeah.
and especially with Claude, LLM assisted coding, all these things. It's really I see people starting to appreciate or comment on or have hot takes about this is a bummer experience. I
Yeah.
don't like
Yeah.
this UX or this UI. So you have with problems come people ideating on solutions
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
awesome things coming out and some not so much. And but that's where I like that momentum. So I think that I'm curious to see how many people are going to focus on that topic specifically.
Yeah.
Um, Most of our end user technical advisory board has focused on that too, and you'll kind of hear pieces and parts of it as well. I think Arun Gupta, our CNCF governing board chairperson, was talking. I think Bart from the community asked him. He's
Yeah.
just like, "What's your least favorite feature about Kubernetes?" And it was the on ramp, which I would
Oh
say
my God. Yes.
I yeah I would debate. I'm like, well, that's not a feature of Kubernetes, but yeah, lover and but I give him a hard time on that one. But I think that I hear him on that one, and it's like when you bring something to Kubernetes, it's there's that pain of understanding and what makes sense. Having a great developer experience. Docker did this amazingly. Heroku with their CLI, amazing. So being more thoughtful in asking the question, why is this so difficult to do, or can we make this better? Seeing that come up more often, I'm really excited for that. I know that's what AI was supposed to fix, but we'll get there someday.
Absolutely. And I was thinking like another interesting topic, which I think fits into, I guess, what folks are experiencing in LA, related to the wildfires, the environment, and technology. And I don't know if you feel this way, but as a techie, I've always like really, really cared about the environment, and yet I work in a field that contributes to the production of greenhouse gases, and it breaks my heart. But at the same time, like it's been interesting to see some of the projects that have sprouted to encourage greener software deployment, and greener development. I was wondering if you had any thoughts around that.
I think very very nuanced thoughts on that front. I'm like you know. I'm like I think about that all the time. I'm like, I know my name's Taylor, but I might not be Taylor Swift with my private jet. You know, that many emissions, but everything is checks and balances on that front.
Yeah,
So even thinking down to Uh, like I've got some sparkling water here. Was that made here? Was it shipped across the country? Was it really efficient? Thinking about things like that, actually doing it and living something that is taking into account all these things, it can be difficult. It's the reverse of that UX experience, right? And a
yeah,
lot of people will succumb to that friction. It's just like, it's just really hard. Or I'd love to buy local, but this is going to be here tomorrow. When you're down in the reality, things might shift or change. But I don't think that should be something that dissuades people from doing the right thing. I think it's Atomic Habits, one of the,
yeah,
and not to shill that book, but it's really good. I had feelings about it before I read it. And after I did, I was like, ooh, this is great. The author made the point that, do you need to get 100% on every test? No. If you're 80 is okay, 91 is okay, 92 is okay. If you're making progress towards something, it's okay to have a little bit of, don't be so difficult on yourself, especially if you want to build the habit or the pattern. When we're
yeah,
taking a look at things within the being kind to the environment and figuring out that impact too. I've seen a lot of groups that have the right intent and focus, but unfortunately, it's really difficult to sell that. Right? We all know what the right thing to do is, but how do we make meaningful progress on that? Can we show a return on investment there for business or people that might want to sponsor these things? Not because it should make money, and yes, it's the right thing to do, but how do we continue making that forward? We can't drive around we can't run around with our phone battery, until it just depletes. We need to figure out some way to refill that and make the effort sustainable itself. So
yeah,
that's the hard thing, right? Is trying to figure that out. But
yeah,
I've seen a lot of people do amazing things, whether it's like, hey, this project, even things like looking at projects around the CNCF
yeah,
ecosystem. Hey, do we really need this much compute? Well, it runs faster. Is that a good enough reason?
yeah,
Can you wait, an hour more or two, or this is just a lot more efficient? Looking at projects that actually measure power consumption or usage, being more mindful about, like, again, do you need that matrix build, or or would one thing make sense, or can we use one runtime? Really creative ways to solve technical problems so we aren't burning up enough.
yeah,
But it's also two pronged as well, right? It's use less energy or be less impactful in some areas, and then generate more in others. And it's going to be
yeah,
that blend and that fusion.
yeah, yeah,
Again, lots of great things to talk about on that front, but I think at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is taking action, take meaningful action. We could talk about it all day, but let's get down to brass tacks and try to figure out how to make that impact, how to create projects like open cost and other things, show savings and other benefits there. Less power means less power bill. So
yeah,
we can figure out strategic ways to convince and talk to our business leaders and executives and showcase that, like, hey, let me make it easy for you to make the right decision. Then
yeah.
you're really compelling.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about talking about those dollars and cents, right? At the end of the day, I mean, that's always what gets people's attention.
If you make sense, you might get dollars too.
Wah, wah. Love it. And the other thing, you talked about also like forging habits. Like, we in tech we got used to like developing that agile mindset, that DevOps mindset. Why not develop that green development mindset? And the other thing that someone pointed out to me that was quite interesting, because we talk about a lot about like having greener infrastructure, greener deployment processes, but then there's also the other side, which is making our software greener, choosing more efficient algorithms, choosing more efficient languages. I know that there's like some languages that are less efficient than others, like some runtimes are really like beefy and stuff. These are things that like we don't necessarily think about, right? We've been just sort of taking this for granted for a while.
It's that I find really fascinating, and I think that like that's a great, not that chip makers need more to focus on right now, given given the state of everything, but I think that it's, uh, yeah, it doesn't make sense for. I've seen even like system on a chip or chips themselves that are like, this is tuned for this language,
Yeah.
this just operates this much better. Seeing some things like TPUs and other stuff as well, it's like, no, this can actually change. It's much more efficient. I find that fascinating, and I think that New Relic and Datadog and others had, I think it was more coming out of the New Relic camp because they were, first on the scene with telemetry and some things, in the early days, at least for me in my career. And what they saw and they talked to in many of their case studies was the fact that um, developers didn't care about the things that they weren't able to see or measure. And that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Again, kind of within the habits thing. If I don't have a way to measure what I'm doing, using, or impacting, it's really hard for me to make a change.
It's so
Um,
true.
I would love to right now be able to tell you what each device in my house pulls and uses in terms of wattage or anything else. Thankfully, data centers are a little bit better instrumented than that, but that still can be difficult. Is this app consuming more power or not? Did it get shifted to some commodity hardware thing that's actually pulling more? Can we, it's there's a lot of unknowns still within the space. I think again, that's where I'd love to see more action, in us to band together to think about is, can we figure out measuring power, stuff like that, even for our homes and other things too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit better in Canada, but I've got to go around I still have to go outside, go around, look at my box, measure it, mark it down.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
that we still have
what's
that too.
going on?
Yeah, it's wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. Like, why does it require that?
And I think that I would encourage more people to ask questions like that too, because
Yeah.
that's where it starts, right? It's like,
Yeah.
why is this a bummer? That's where the conversation starts. And I love that. And then we can start to build some things on that front. Even if it's just a millimeter forward, that's further than we were yesterday. So really
Exactly.
encourage people on that front.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And the other thing that I want to talk about on that similar thread of environmental sustainability is, AI, as you mentioned earlier, uh, that is like that just is such a power hog, and yet it's a little contradictory too because AI can help us potentially to tune our systems as well. So finding that balance, right?
I think with that too, it's when you think about development, whether or just operational work too, right? It's like, let's make this work first, right? It's like learning a new meal or something that you're cooking too. It's like,
Mhm.
let me just see if putting these things together works. And it's like, do you like it? More salt, less salt? It's an iterative process. And that's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same thing I think with any development or new paradigm shift like this is like, is it good? And then we figure out yes or no. Then comes that should never keep scaling up. It won't take you 50 minutes to make that meal again. You get better and better and better, and it takes less. You can start to eyeball the ingredients. You get more familiar with it.
yeah.
That's what I would reason is should happen in a healthy kind of ecosystem or network effect or new paradigm shift. We can't, no way we should continue to just like, yep, just keep burning things until the ocean's boiling. It's like, no, 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 no. And I find it kind of sad where you do see deals and things like that where a lot of people have already signed contracts for compute and these other things, and there's not truthfully there's not a lot of people that have had the time and experience and they're like experts within creating these RAG applications or AI based applications. So unfortunately a lot of these GPUs are just sitting there, many of them turned on just burning and chilling. They're not in standby mode, not with the money that was paid for them. So
Yeah,
again, I think being more intentional about like having something at the right time. If you can try to, as much as in your life or these open source efforts or elsewhere, lazy load them in. Try
yeah,
not to pull things down until you need them. That's why I don't have 8 different cans of water around my desk right now. I've
Yeah,
two,
yeah.
and that's one too many.
Yeah, it's akin to like leaving a room, turn the lights off if you're not using it, or like you've got a power bar but nothing, all the things that are plugged into it are not in use. Well, that power bar consumes some power as well just from being on, even if the other things aren't on, so turn that off.
Yeah, you don't
Just
leave your
like little
stereo on
habits,
like max volume when you leave the house. You're like,
right?
all right, house, enjoy the tunes. You know.
Exactly, exactly. And this is actually, it reminds me too, like, my husband is like into home automation, so he like automated all the things during
Oh,
lockdown. And this is actually a great example of like home automation, where home automation can be your friend, right? Because you can have certain lights come on at certain times, or if you my favorite is if you forget to like if you leave a light on accidentally and you've left the house, you can see that on your phone and you can toggle that switch from your phone, which is like amazing, right? Having these little conveniences that also help out in the end.
I love that. I've got a Google Nest. I'm also big on home automation too, and like I used to have the nice like drive up and the lights will fade on, and it's just like very immersive triggers and things like that would happen with my house. But I've since moved. I have been here for 3 years, but I need to maybe spend a weekend or two thinking through that. But I do have like a Google Nest, and I love that because I'll go and I'll travel and things like that from time to time. And it's nice to be able to have that at least switch to idle or eco
Yeah,
mode when I'm out. Google Nest will at least, and many others, I believe, will actually connect. At least in LA, there's like surge times, and so to reduce the load on the electrical grid, it'll actually say like, okay, you can survive with like, let me turn it up to maybe like 76 or 77 degrees Fahrenheit,
yeah,
I won't turn on heating until this time, and it will really help out.
yeah,
I haven't seen anything like that suggested, attempted, tried, but maybe that's something that I'm curious to see what the community thinks on that one. Do
yeah,
we do that and subscribe to that in a data center, or like, hey, this region, or even shifting data centers when something is, you don't need to pay shipping costs for your applications, thankfully. You just need to pull down from a registry or something. Might it make sense to run in a specific data center at a certain time? um, it's things like that where you could start asking the what if or why or maybe questions where
yeah,
we could start having those impacts.
yeah. It's all about being curious, right?
Yeah, and everyone has infinite time, so
Yeah, yeah,
I
right.
get you can't explore everything, but that's
Um,
why it's such a broad community is awesome. This is
yeah,
going to appeal to some people, not to others, and so people can run off and check these things out. Again, I think that curiosity is so critical. Again, urging people. I know it's like I fall prey to this too, but it's so fun to talk about. But we really need help making these things happen. No one's going to go do it, unless we actually go do it.
yeah, it's true, and that's why I think events like KubeCon can be great for that, because it's a meeting of the minds. People are like so jazzed up. You get the adrenaline rush, the dopamine rush, and people get excited. It helps to hype people up about topics, and I mean, I've come back from so many KubeCons like, oh my god, I got
Yeah.
to try this out now, right? You hear something cool, someone's presented on an interesting topic, and I love that power of the community. I also want to give a plug to Open Source Summit, as well, because it's I liken it to like a KubeCon light. The
Yes.
same awesomeness of KubeCon without the
Swing
maybe
your
the
elbows.
overwhelm. Yeah,
it's
that's always so much fun.
I like those, and I like the there's a couple for folks that are like CNCF is underneath the Linux Foundation as a sub foundation. If you think of Open Source Summit, a Linux Foundation event, there's also one for LF members called LF Member Summit. That's like an open source summit light, and so that's like 100, 200 people, and even less. And I like that level of, I like the different tiers of events like that, because there are some where you like really want to dive deep with somebody and get strategic, and then KubeCon where you're like, oh, you just kind of cherry pick or run around the technical candy store, like a little bit of
Yes.
that, talk to them, go here, do that, get that swag.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it just speaks to the power of community. Like I got involved with the CNCF like actually when I took my first DevRel job almost 3 years ago in open telemetry, and like this was my first personal experience in contributing to open source, and like I'm so lucky that the open telemetry community is like such a kind, thoughtful community where I've said this many times and I'll say it again. Like I submitted my first PR with like deep trepidation, and even though people had comments, of course they want to help you improve, but it was like, I want to help you improve. I'm not here to bite your head off. Not like you see with some very traumatic Stack Overflow posts where you're asking a question and
Yeah.
someone's
What
like,
a dummy. Yeah,
and
you're
you're
like,
like,
oh my
I
gosh.
just wanted an answer. Yeah, everyone has been so nice. Like I'll post questions on the various OTEL channels on CNCF Slack, and like people take the time to answer the questions. Like I really appreciate that.
I think that you're capturing something that is really interesting to me too. I really like the psychology aspect of that as well. I'm not psych major, I'm psyched about psychology, but I don't have a major in that. But it's some of the books behind me, like Carl Jung and stuff like that. Very fascinating, especially when it comes down to that feedback and figuring out the best way to share that. Early like Linux days, I think there was a joke, like you had said on Reddit, where to get a response from early days community, it was you had to insult it almost like Linux is dumb because I can't set up Wi-Fi. Then you would have tons of response. Well, no, it's like the well
Yeah.
actually crowd comes to well actually you and show you how to do that. And that's helpful, at least back then. Now it's completely different. And it's this like, hey, what do you think about this? And I feel like we've gotten far further away, hopefully that with that kind of feedback in people. But yeah, nothing, no community is perfect. Very aware of that. But I think that it's interesting to see how we keep changing and rethinking how meaningful we can be to one another and figure out how to actually help you. Or I've loved working at companies that have documents. They're like, here's how to best work with me. And you're like, I wake up
Yeah.
early. I like coffee over tea.
Oh,
Some of the
yeah.
icebreakers that you've had too.
Oh
And
my
it's like,
God. Yeah, that's great.
what's your human readme look like? I love
Yeah.
that. I think that's
Oh
fun.
my God, that's so great. I hadn't heard of that before, but that is so perfect. The human readme. That's great.
Yeah, I don't know what my license is. Hopefully Apache too. I think so.
Now, I wanted to ask you because you're with the CNCF. How long have you been with the CNCF, and how much change have you seen in the time that you've been with the CNCF?
So much. It's been just shy of 3 years now. Yeah, it's been really fascinating to me. I remember coming in, and this was like post COVID, not yeah, post Malone, and and we got to see everybody returning back to conferences and interactions, and everybody was just so hungry for that kind of interaction. Right, we'd been cooped up for so long, and it was just really nice to see one another and get back to this speed of development and exchanging of ideas and everything like that. I loved that. But definitely, that pent up steam and energy and momentum couldn't carry on forever, and so kind of saw that like really concentrated. Then it started to separate again into different facets within the community. Really been interesting over the past couple of years to see the focus on licenses altogether. I used to work at HashiCorp before CNCF. Ask ask me anything. Feel free to reach out at me, stuff like that. I have many spicy opinions and thoughts on that front, given where I am with all my focuses and biases. But I think that's been something that's been really interesting to see too. Lots of market effects and other, more things that you probably wouldn't read before you you go to bed. Not that interesting. That's not really story worthy, but there's things like in the US with like the zero interest rate percentage going away, how organizations think about their software engineering teams, how they think about open source, going through similar things like you had brought up with environmental sustainability. How do we pay for this? How do we make sense of this? And then getting to, I'm really like huge shout out to Bob Killen, who joined the CNCF coming from Google. He saw this problem so acutely and then has been able to really develop some great material and thoughts on how you measure ROI and prove this out as like, no, we have the data. It is much better. It's better than just saying like everything's better in open source. He's like, I'll show you exactly where that
Yeah.
is. Aisle
Yep.
6, come here. You know, so I think that more efforts like that are going to be what we see over the next couple of years. Kind of cutting through it. I think AI is a good intention and direction, but we have to get it right. And there
Yeah.
are places where we're generating a lot of like slop and glut and just this waste, especially within content, pull requests and things like that. And that's such a
God.
bummer. Again,
Yeah.
intention's good. It might be able to get you a feature that's great, but like, let's figure out something that is maintainable for maintainers and doesn't over index them, waste their time, because they've already got a ton on their shoulders. We don't want
Yeah.
to add more to them. Here's 15 more pull requests to take a look at. Probably not how they want to spend their day.
Yeah.
Triage, intention, kind of this like, how do we have our heads up display on a lot of these things is I think what's important to take a look at.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
But yeah, that's just from what I can see. There will absolutely be unknown unknowns. I'm curious to see what they're going to be over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's definitely really exciting to have seen like the CNCF like just grow so much, and like there's such a sense of community and camaraderie, and I think the reason why so many projects in the CNCF have done well too is because I think organizations are seeing a value in having folks on the payroll contributing to open source projects. And I give open telemetry as an example because it's a project that has a backing of major observability vendors where they do have developers on the payroll doing OTel work, because we're trying to establish it as a standard so that we're all ingesting the same data. And the differentiating factor is, what do we do with your data? And if we didn't have that, then it would be back to, the pre-OTel days of like, everyone's just like maintaining their own framework. And that's just like more cognitive load than you need, really. And plus, you don't have the power of the community. Like, you have people from different companies. I work with frenemies, I'll say in air quotes, because they're all my friends. Like, seriously, I don't see them as competitors. Like, we all work towards the same goal. And I think that's what's so wonderful about CNCF.
I completely agree. I still haven't found a good fit for this. I will one of these days, but I really do want to do like like a funny disc track with someone else in the community. Like, we might not see eye to eye. I'll burn someone on like social media or something like that in a playful match. But it's that's fun, and then you kind of like encourage one another as like your rival within the industry. I do think that's so much fun. And yeah, I think it's really about the consistency too, right? Having a place that you can actually point and go. It's not like, oh, that's the only meetup I can go to where I can express this, or people
Yeah.
are interested in the same thing. We finally kind of created this community where we can all come together and discuss all that stuff. End users feel safe to be able to explore those things, and vendors to showcase new technologies and these other things. We can set up standards and have certainty that that's not going to change out from underneath us in however many years.
Yeah.
It's safety, and I really
Yes.
appreciate all the people that help cultivate and create that. Our one of our end user technical advisory board members also talked about open source and saying that think of it almost as a vendor too. And I think that
Mhm.
that was really impactful to me, hearing that at the past KubeCon in Salt Lake City was like, oh my gosh, he's right. How many times do you talk to a vendor and interact with them? Imagine that relationship if you just never spoke to them, or any person in your life. You're like, you're in my life, I'm never going to engage with you.
Yeah.
Open source won't work like that either. Vendor
No.
relationship doesn't work like that. Friendship, horrible if that's how it works. What a bummer. So it's all about intention. It's all about the perspective that you hold on that front. And again, like, and hopefully that's always changing, and you're never the same person, from moment to moment as you go through all those perspective changes. But it's fun. It's a wild place to be.
Yeah, definitely. And you also touched upon something that I think is like a key thing for these types of events, conferences, are the relationships. Like,
Mm.
when I think back to my first KubeCon, where I knew maybe 5 people, and now every time I go to a KubeCon, it feels like a big like family reunion, and
Yeah,
it's like your CubeCon friends.
yeah.
You see them, once a year or twice a year, and it's like, hey, let's hang out, let's nerd out on stuff.
Don't be square, just be there at KubeCon.
That's where all the cool kids at. The other thing that I want to go back to, because we're talking about the fires in LA, and we were talking earlier about like the rallying of the community, because we're talking about the tech community, but also we've got like the community, like the human community, and which I think is so important. If you could talk a little bit about that, what the experience has been like. It's obviously like a really crappy situation, and like Toronto, we are not near a forested area, but northeast of us is Quebec, and we had a couple of years some forest fires, and the smoke blew down in our direction. So we saw like some haze and whatever, and the air quality was bad. And I remember having to wear a mask outside because like you'd go outside and you can't breathe. You're much closer to that. That is scary. Like tell folks what that's about, like so that they get a sense of like this is serious stuff.
It's truly wild. I was I went up to see some friends in Palo Alto just the weekend before all of this kicked off. I ended up driving back down to Los Angeles in an EV, for those for those. And it was on Tuesday that I was coming back down. I was getting back into Los Angeles maybe like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And so that was prime time for all of this starting to really kick off. That was the Altadena fire that was close to me that kicked off. As I was driving home, I was about 30 minutes out, and that 100-mile-an-hour gust of wind blew. Cars were crashing, debris
Yikes.
was thrown onto the road, people's windshields were exploding. It was,
Whoa.
I can't even tell you. Like, fear didn't enter into that. It was more like I was like I was watching Mad Max, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it was like I was like,
yeah,
"What?" You're in shock at that point in
yeah.
time. I continue driving, roiling black smoke. Cars pulled off to the side of the road. Have to drive through it, and then finally, 3 minutes out from my house, transformers exploding, purple,
Oh
white,
my god.
sparks, and I'm like,
Wow.
what is going on? It's look,
That feels very dystopian.
I'll look back and like every X amount of time I'll look back and it will be funnier because I'm safe,
Yeah.
but like in that moment, oh my goodness, it was just,
Wow.
again, the fear is not there. It is more just shock. And you're like, did what I see just happen? Is
Wow.
Has been most of the feeling here, at least for me. I know I've talked to some friends and others, that some have had to evacuate, some have been displaced. Thankfully, all of them, they still have their lives, families. It's like thankfully. But seeing a lot of the footage, videos, and then hearing their stories, some of them have just been really fearful or angry that their friends or family haven't reached out or they don't hear anyone. There's just this lingering frustration, and they don't
Yeah.
know how to make sense of it. And I think that that's kind of the sad part. The good part is that was kind of earlier on, and like I'd say more of last week's kind of like vibe and temperature check. This week, you started to see a little bit of it last week, but people showing up. Oh my gosh, you lost everything. Here, take some clothes. Tons of businesses around here, like candle stores and companies, places you just have nothing. That you don't see the correlation.
Yeah.
Come work here. We have Wi-Fi. We're going to give you water. Hey, anyone affected by this? We'll give you a free meal. So many places just like completely open doors, open arms, willing to help, assist. Comedy stores here putting on shows, fundraisers. 100% of proceeds are going to victims of these fires. Amazing. Neighbors in affected areas like, hey, my cul-de-sac got impacted. We have a GoFundMe. Here are these people's names. Here's what they lost. Please help us. There's a park just nearby my house, about like a quarter of a block away, and tons of green grass there, and a whole bunch of people just had gear, clothes, things, cutlery, plates, things that you just wouldn't normally expect to have. It's been, I would have never thought in Los Angeles, where it's a city that's really separate. You have to drive everywhere. It just
Yeah.
kind of feels distant, even when you're in a very tight knit community. You don't talk to your neighbor, every day kind of vibes. To see that where there's always people out, they're overwhelmed with people trying to donate time, money, supplies, things like that. I would have never expected. It is truly one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And so I love seeing that from the community and getting to talk with people, get to hear their stories. You get to see what's going on. You get this form of connection that, again, after COVID, it's like, this is finally, we are starting to get back to, we're learning how to be ourselves again.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that.
Oh, that's so heartwarming. I mean, in the midst of the tragedy, to see humanity come together like that, which, we kind of need these feel good, heartwarming stories, because times are testy right now, for sure. To put it
You
nicely.
too. Yeah. I think that it's just one of those things of life that might not be fair, make sense, or there's like justice, fairness, and I forget what the other one, and like equality, or the things that you are never guaranteed in life. Like, I wish that they were, but you shouldn't need something like this to happen to have this warmth. But like sometimes that's just how it plays out. But it not getting away from how beautiful that this is, and getting to see those people come together, like you said. So I'm inspired. It's hard to not say that, and just like, it's dust in my eye. It's dust, I swear.
Yeah, it's really heartwarming to see, and like I said, we need more of these stories. We need to be reminded. We need to remind each other that there's still goodness and kindness in the world, which is so important. Now we're coming up on time, but before we close things off, I was wondering if you had any words of wisdom or hot takes.
Yeah, I think that really, that's just very front and center for me right now. Is just with everything going on, AI, wildfires, all these other things. It's for me, what's right in front of my eyes is just that intention. When you take a look at, again, seeing this around the community, going backwards in our flow, beautiful to see that people are focused on things, like, what do I bring? What do I do? And then self-organizing.
Yeah,
Amazing. Is it perfect? No, but everything is getting to where it needs to go within reason. I think the same thing with AI, focusing in on intention. Does it make sense to have 7 pull requests and all those, are you a 10x developer with all the green tiles on GitHub, or is this something that's having an impact, right? Um, think about the change that you're making. I encourage people to have momentum, to not be discouraged on that front. Figure out your balance, but while you're there, think about some other things to do too. If you've corrected this word or this thing, look around. Is there anything else that might make sense to change in your code base, or otherwise? Are there other questions for a process or other things that you haven't thought of that you're like, let me just give this another 20 minutes and think, just to make sure? It's hard to get changes in after the fact, and then you kind of lose that credibility too, unfortunately, when you're quick to ship something or get something out. You can lose all that trust that you've spent a lot of time building, or
yeah,
you can hurt yourself in ways that you might not see, just as something to caution on. But overall, it's very very interesting start to the new year in so many aspects. I want to hear all of your stories. I definitely want to encourage people to reach out if you have trouble or questions with getting into open source. Let's figure something out, please. I'm not somebody who's like, don't at me, don't reach out. Please do. I love having these conversations, async or sync. Would love to chat more on that front. If you're not feeling like you're able to bring your full, true, authentic self, let's have a conversation. Let's fix that. I'd love to offer anything that I can on that front.
oh, I love that, and I will vouch for what you said, because I reached out to you on CNCF
Boom.
Slack and said, "Hey, you want to be
We'll
on
make
my
it
podcast?" And you're like,
happen. We make it happen.
yeah, so super reachable, definitely. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Taylor, for geeking out with me today, and for taking the time, especially in the midst of all this chaos going on in the LA area. And y'all, don't forget to subscribe and be sure to check the show notes for additional resources and to connect with us and our guests on social media. Until next time.
Peace out and geek out.
Geeking Out is hosted and produced by me, Adriana Vilela. I also compose and perform the theme music on my trusty clarinet. Geeking Out is also produced by my daughter, Hannah Maxwell, who incidentally designed all of the cool graphics. Be sure to follow us on all the socials by going to bento.me/geekingout.